Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. When attorney Preston Caldwell saw the financial disclosure documents, his face instantly turned as pale as paper. Sophia, sitting across from him, is waiting to sign off on the divorce proceedings, already mentally calculating how she will divide her husband Marcus's meager unemployment benefits. However, the air in the room seemed to freeze when the number came into view. $67 million, a figure that was like a bolt from the blue, instantly shattering Sophia's carefully calculated plans. Preston Caldwell, an attorney known in the Seattle divorce community for his calmness and savvy, couldn't hide the shock on his face at the moment. This document completely upended all their expectations of this divorce case, and even all their knowledge of Marcus Chen as a person. 6 months ago, on a Friday night in Seattle, Marcus Chen sat in the den he considers a sanctuary in his home. It was just him in the study, and the email that had been drafted on the computer screen. The shimmering light from the screen reflected off his tired but passionate face. He is a senior software architect, but at this moment, the sense of accomplishment in his heart far exceeds any professional title. He has just completed optimization techniques for a revolutionary AI algorithm. This technology is like a key to the future, capable of increasing the processing efficiency of existing AI systems by 300%, while reducing energy consumption by 70%. What's more, the technology is entirely a personal project he developed at home using countless sleepless nights while working at Technova. It is the result of more than a decade of technical accumulation and his infinite visions for the future of science and technology, and has nothing to do with his employment contract with Technova. It is purely his own personal wisdom. Marcus's finger hovered above the send button, his fingertips trembling slightly. The email's recipient list featured several of Silicon Valley's largest venture capital firms. He understands the potential value of this technology, which is not a simple optimization but a disruptive innovation. Once announced, it will revolutionize the game for the entire industry and bring immeasurable business value. But he hesitated, a wave of complex emotions swirling around him, both a desire for success and a wariness of unknown risks. He took a deep breath, and his gaze fell on a map of the world hanging on the wall of his study, his eyes glittering with longing and caution for the future. He knew that once this technology was released, it would inevitably cause an industry earthquake, which would be followed by not only wealth, but also potentially unforeseen trouble. He preferred to detonate the heavy bomb in a more robust manner after he had prepared everything. After all, this achievement, which had condensed his countless efforts, was his greatest pride in this life. However, just as Marcus is immersed in his vision of the future, the voice of his wife Sophia comes from the living room downstairs, talking to her BFF Madison. The girls discuss the upcoming annual charity gala and Sophia's need for a new designer gown to wow the crowd. Marcus hears his wife complaining that he's been working too much overtime lately, devoting himself to technical research that she finds inexplicable, but doesn't seem to be making enough money to support her increasingly lavish lifestyle. Marcus is just too conservative, Madison. Sophia's voice penetrated the floorboards clearly, with an imperceptible hint of contempt. He's always buried in technology that no one understands, living like a robot and never thinking about how to turn it into real money. Madison, you know, that investment firm Richard owns made millions last year, and they go on vacation to Europe every year, staying in private villas. I really don't know when I'm going to live like that. Marcus's fingers stopped. Richard Blackwood, Madison's husband, a private equity partner with a small reputation in Silicon Valley and Seattle's investment circles, is someone Sophia has been talking about frequently in recent months. He noticed that in recent months, Sophia had begun frequenting the various high-end parties Madison and Richard were hosting at their lakeside mansion. Whenever she came back, Sophia was always excited to talk about how successful entrepreneurs spent their money and built business empires, full of envy and aspiration, and more disdainful of his technical work. I really envy you sometimes, Madison. Richard is so ambitious and business savvy that he always catches the wind and makes a fortune. Unlike Marcus, it's so boring to just code all day and live in your own tech world with no concept of what money is. A chill went through Marcus's heart. He silently closed the email screen. He decided to keep the technology under wraps for the time being, hiding it even deeper. Not because he didn't want to succeed, but because he wanted to deal with it at the right time and in the most favorable and safe way. He had a strong premonition that premature exposure of this astounding technology might bring about unintended consequences that he could not now afford, or even, perhaps, a devastating blow. He needed a foolproof plan to ensure that his heart and soul would not be coveted and plundered by others. 3 weeks later, Marcus's quiet life was shattered for good. He received a notice from Technova's Human Resources Department. As the company undergoes a massive reorganization and cost-cutting, his entire department will be disbanded and his senior software architect position eliminated. Although the company generously offered a severance package that was enough to sustain them for 6 months, it was certainly a crushing blow, more like a merciless judgment, to a family that was used to a six-figure annual salary and an even higher standard of living. Later that night, Marcus returns home with a sense of trepidation. He could hear Sophia chopping vegetables from the kitchen, at a brisk pace and seemingly in a good mood. "Honey, I have something to tell you." Marcus stopped in the kitchen doorway, his voice a little raspy. Without looking back, Sophia continued to cut the vegetables on the cutting board and asked absently, "What is it? Did you take on another big project and have to work overtime?" "I got fired today." Marcus tried to keep his voice calm, but he could feel his heart racing. The knife clanked to a halt on the cutting board. A dead silence fell over the kitchen in an instant. Sophia's movements froze as she slowly turned around, a flash of disbelieving shock in her eyes before it was replaced by a burning rage. That anger, like an icy flame, instantly engulfed Marcus. "What? Say that again. What did you say?" Sophia's voice was sharp and piercing, as if it were trying to pierce Marcus' eardrums. "The company reorganized and my entire department was laid off. And it wasn't just me." Marcus tries to explain, tries to stay sane, but the look on Sophia's face makes him feel strange and afraid. Sophia's face went from shock to anger and finally to a coldness and disdain that Marcus had never seen before. Her lips tightened into a straight line, as if with a blade. "I knew it would be like this." Her voice was cold as a knife, each word tinged with slush. "I predicted you would fail and accomplish nothing. Look what you've done all these years." "Sophia, it's not my fault. The whole tech industry is laying off people. It's the big picture." Marcus tries to defend himself, but his words seem so pale. "Don't give me excuses. Marcus, do you think I haven't noticed? Those co-workers of yours, one by one, are getting promotions and raises, living in bigger houses, and buying better cars. But what about you? You're still doing research projects that no one understands or cares about. Madison told me last month that Richard says your technical thinking is so outdated it's not up to date and has no business value whatsoever." Sophia's speech is getting faster and faster, her voice higher and higher pitched, like a storm is coming. Marcus felt a chill run through his bones, and he couldn't believe his ears. "Richard said that? How does he know the details of my work? What did you say to him?" "Because I asked him. Of course I'm going to ask him," Sophia admitted unabashedly, with even a hint of smugness on her face. "I wanted to know if you had a future or not, and lo and behold, he was absolutely right. Now that you're unemployed, what are we going to do? What about the mortgage? What about my credit card bill? Am I to drink the northwest wind with you? I have severance pay and unemployment insurance. We can." Marcus tries to comfort her, tries to paint a picture of a future where she can get through this, but Sophia simply won't listen. "Can what? Can you live like a poor person? Can I eat instant noodles every day?" Sophia's voice grew harsh with a heavy dose of sarcasm. "I'm telling you, Marcus, I've had enough. I'm tired of your mediocrity. I'm tired of your incompetence. I'm tired of you making me look bad in front of my friends. I'm sick of that pitying look they give me every time I party with Madison and the girls, and I'm sick of you failing." Marcus tried to go up to her and hug her, trying to show his apology and determination with his actions. "I'll find a new job. It's only temporary. Trust me." "Temporarily?" Sophia sneered and took a step back, avoiding Marcus's outstretched hand, contempt in her eyes. "Marcus, face the truth. You're 42 years old, and you know what that age means in the tech industry. No one is going to hire an outdated programmer with no business acumen. Those advanced skills of yours are worthless to the company." That night, Sophia slammed the door and left Marcus sitting alone in his cold study, Sophia's words stinging him like a million sharp needles, each one laced with venom. He looked at the email on the screen that had been drafted months ago but never sent, the one that held all his hopes and future. His fingers hovered over the keyboard again, and this time, without hesitation, his fingertips clicked send without hesitation, with an unprecedented firmness and determination. In this moment, he's no longer just a fired programmer. He's a betrayed husband, an avenger determined to get justice for himself and his heart and soul. Over the next few weeks, Marcus suffered in silence from his wife's growing indifference and contempt. Sophia intensifies the situation and begins to publicly express her intense dissatisfaction with the marriage, making no secret of her disappointment and disgust with Marcus. She blames Marcus's unemployment on his incompetence, repeatedly mocking his outdated technology and lack of future. She spends more time with Madison, often leaving the house without telling Marcus, returning late at night, and sometimes staying out all night. Home, which has been turned into an ice cellar, and Marcus, who has become an abandoned prisoner in the ice cellar. He observes every subtle change in Sophia, silently recording them in his mind. One day, Marcus notices Sophia texting with an unfamiliar number with a smile on her face that he hasn't shown him in a long time. It was a sweet, expectant smile with a girlish shyness and excitement. His heart tightened, his instincts telling him that this was no ordinary exchange between friends. Who sent the message? It looks like you're happy, Marcus asked tentatively, his voice as calm as if there were no ripples. Madison, she's asking about lunch arrangements for tomorrow. Sophia answered quickly, but her eyes dodged, afraid to meet Marcus, her fingers swiping quickly on her phone in an attempt to hide something. Marcus nodded his head, seemingly believing her explanation, but the doubts in his mind began to grow like vines of frantic, tightening around his heart. He began to deliberately notice some details that he had previously ignored. Sophia began to frequently change to a new perfume. Each time, it was that expensive and strong brand-name fragrance. He closet also quietly more than a few designer dresses that he had never seen. Her cell phone also set up a new password, completely guarded against him. When she went out, she always dressed up carefully, glowing, as if she was going to go to an important date, not simply have dinner with friends. When she goes out, she always dresses up and looks great, as if she is going on an important date, not just dinner with friends. A month later, Marcus finally heard back from his first venture capital firm. Venture Capital Associates, a Silicon Valley firm known for its bold investments in emerging technologies, showed great interest in his algorithmic techniques, inviting him to give a detailed technical demonstration. This was followed by similar invitations from several other heavyweight venture capital firms clamoring to learn more about what they called the future of technology. Marcus carefully arranges these secret meetings, telling Sophia each time that he's attending a job interview. Technically, it's not a lie. He's actually looking for a job. It's just that the nature of the job is a little different than Sophia had imagined, and it's going to change everything she knows about work and wealth. It's just that the nature of the job is a little different than Sophia had imagined, and it's going to change everything she knows about work and wealth. He deliberately chooses meeting places that are far away from his home, where Sophia won't easily notice him. He makes sure he dresses and talks like an unemployed job seeker. In the third meeting, Jonathan Miller, a partner at Redwood Ventures, an investor known for his vision and decisive decision-making, got right to the point and expressed their great interest. The fervor for this technology burned in his eyes. Marcus, your algorithm is one of the most promising technologies we've seen in years. No, not one. Its value is immeasurable, Jonathan said excitedly, with undeniable certainty in his tone. We are prepared to offer an unprecedented amount of money to obtain an exclusive license to this technology. How much? Marcus's voice was a little surprisingly calm, as if he were talking about a trivial matter of no consequence. His heart, however, was stirred by the vengeance that was about to be drawn. An initial investment of $10 million plus a 15% annual technology license fee. Based on our projections for the global market, this technology will have an annual revenue potential of more than $500 million over the next 5 years, and that number is rising. The numbers Jonathan gives are enough to make anyone's heart race. Marcus kept his incredible composure and rippled. I need to think about it. This is, after all, a very big decision. In fact, He's already made his decision. It's enough money for him to fulfill his plan of revenge and still have a surplus for him to start a whole new life. But he needed time to set up each of the next steps, and he wanted to make sure that every step was foolproof and left nothing for Sophia to take advantage of. Later that night, Marcus arrives home to find Sophia well-dressed and ready to go out. She was wearing a black designer dress he'd never seen before, tailored to fit and elegant in style, accentuating her pretty figure, and her face, with its delicate makeup, was more flattering than ever. The air smelled of her new perfume, rich and seductive. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked, his tone rippling as if it was just a casual question. "Dinner with Madison," Sophia replied, but her eyes stayed glued to the screen of her cell phone as she replied to the message on the fly. "Might be late. You don't have to wait for me." Marcus nodded, an imperceptible cold glint in his eyes. "Do you need a ride? Or maybe I'll pick you up." "No, I'll just drive myself," Sophia said, grabbed her designer handbag and couldn't wait to get out the door without even giving Marcus a second glance. Marcus watched his wife leave, then walked to the den. He needs to do some research, something more direct and conclusive. He knew it was time to tear away that disguise. As a veteran software engineer, Marcus is no stranger to digital tracking and web survey technology. He was more than capable of getting the information he needed without being detected. He spent an hour setting up a covert surveillance system that tracks the activity of all devices on the home network, including data transfers, connection times, and even IP addresses. While he doesn't have direct access to Sophia's cell phone content, he can monitor all the data streams she sends over her home Wi-Fi, including the frequency, time, and destination of messages. Over the next few days, the data began to show a disturbing pattern. Sophia did correspond with someone frequently, but that person was never Madison. The recipient of the message is a contact named R, and the communication is mainly during working hours and late at night. Even more troubling is the fact that the frequency, length, and location of these communications coincide with the times and places she claims to have eaten with Madison and watched a movie with Madison. Marcus did further investigation. He cross-referenced Sophia's credit card records and restaurant reservation information using a number of publicly available web-based reconnaissance tools. He discovers that Sophia regularly spends money in the private dining room of one of Seattle's top upscale hotels, with each bill showing a meal for two. Through further cross-referencing, he discovered that this hotel was the very venue where Richard Blackwood often hosted business meetings and private parties. Various clues gradually converged, and a clear and brutal picture emerged in his mind. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later. Marcus was sorting through his mail when he accidentally found a return receipt notice for an email Sophia had sent to Madison. Out of professional habit and a growing suspicion in his mind, he clicked on the mail server log. While he couldn't see the content of the emails, he could see when and how often they were sent, and most importantly, the recipient's address. The data shows that Sophia emailed Madison far less often than she claimed, to the point where it could be argued that Madison was just a front. However, there is an email address named r.blackwood@capital-partners.com, is listed, appeared hundreds of times the communication records, high frequency, the content of the secret, far beyond the ordinary business transactions. Marcus's heart sank, as if into an icy abyss. Richard Blackwood, Madison's husband, the successful businessman Sophia had always raved about, the one who had called him technologically obsolete and unpromising under Sophia's breath. It turns out that it's all intertwined, a web of lies that has long been carefully woven and is slowly tightening on him. He felt an icy rage burning in his chest, not an impulse, but the kind of fire that transformed into extreme calm after being betrayed to the core. That night, when Sophia again claims to be going out with Madison, Marcus makes a decision. He needed more professional evidence, hard evidence, so she couldn't deny it. He turned on his computer, searched, and contacted a private investigator with an excellent reputation in the industry, Thomas Reed. A week later, Detective Thomas Reed arrived at Marcus' office with a thick, detailed report. The report not only contains a large number of clear photographs showing Sophia and Richard in intimate scenes in their hotel room, including holding hands, hugging, kissing, and even more intimate moments, but also detailed call logs, text message exchanges, and hotel spending records. Everything points to the conclusion that their illicit relationship has been going on for at least 4 months. Looking at the timeline, Thomas said in a heavy tone, pointing to the points in time labeled on the report. The relationship began when your wife was attending frequent parties at their house. She shows an interest in Richard that goes beyond being friends from the start. Based on my research, Richard outlined a glamorous future for your wife, promising that once he dealt with his financial problems and broke free of his current marriage, he would provide her with a life of luxury that she had never enjoyed before, a future that was completely different from what you could have given her. Marcus looked through the photos and documents in silence. Each photo, each paragraph, like a sharp knife, mercilessly piercing through the softest part of his heart. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, all sorts of complicated emotions tossed around in his heart like raging waves, almost drowning him. But in the end, an extreme calmness and sobriety, like a solid rock, firmly prevailed. He knew that emotions would only cause him to lose his judgment, and what he needed most right now was a precise counterattack. Any other information? About Richard's or Sophia's movements? Marcus's voice was horribly calm, without a hint of emotion. There is. Richard has been experiencing some very serious financial problems lately. His private equity fund suffered major losses in the last quarter, with several high-risk investments going down the drain, leading a large number of investors to start panic withdrawals and the capital chain on the verge of breaking. From what I've been told in the industry, he's desperately looking for new investment opportunities and is in desperate need of a large sum of money to salvage the situation and avoid bankruptcy. Thomas added, a hint of pity in his tone. Marcus nodded, a new calculation in his mind. It turns out that this is not just an ordinary affair, which is laced with calculations of interest. He suddenly understood Sophia's curiosity about his technology program and her seemingly unintentional inquiries. Thank you, Thomas. Please keep monitoring. The more detail, the better. I need more information, especially focusing on their financial status and next steps. Marcus accounted for it. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus demonstrates his technical genius and business acumen in negotiations with Redwood Ventures while enduring Sophia's increasingly tense and nasty attitude at home. Her contempt for Marcus is no longer veiled, but open and naked, as if he were a disgusting piece of trash. She begins to criticize Marcus's abilities unmercifully in front of Madison, and even in front of their mutual friends, questioning his progress in finding a job and portraying him as a total loser. You've been out of work for 2 months, Marcus. What the hell are you doing? Sophia said coldly one day at dinner, with impatience and disdain in her tone. My friends are asking me what the hell you're doing and why you haven't found a job yet. What am I supposed to say? Calling my husband a loser who can't even feed himself. I'm trying to find the right opportunity, Sophia, and that takes time. Marcus replied calmly, as if the words were none of his business. He knew that she was setting him up for imminent failure. The right opportunity? Marcus, wake up. Sophia sneered and put down her knife and fork with a piercing sound. At your age and ability, you'd be lucky to get a job in the tech industry these days that pays $30,000 a year. What else do you think about the right opportunity? Don't daydream. Marcus looked at her calmly, an imperceptible glint of cold light flashing in his eyes. 30,000? Do you really think I'm only worth $30,000? Yes, Marcus, 30,000. That's the reality you have to face. Sophia's tone was sarcastic and condescending. Maybe you should consider a complete career change to something more practical, like fixing computers or working as a salesman at an electronics store, jobs that don't require any advanced skills or business acumen. A hint of mockery tugged at the corners of her mouth, as if she'd seen Marcus's miserable future as a complete bottom-feeder laborer. That night, as Sophia rushes out, once again dressed to the nines, under the pretext of going to the movies with Madison, Marcus dials Jonathan Miller's number. He knew that the time was right. Jonathan, I accept your offer from Redwood Ventures, but I have a condition attached. Marcus's voice was steady and firm. What conditions? Marcus, we can talk. Jonathan's voice sounded a little excited, and it was clear that he had been waiting for this call for a long time. I want all the formalities of this deal to be completed within 2 weeks, and I need absolute confidentiality that nothing can be leaked out until the official contract is signed. Marcus emphasizes that he wants to make sure his secret weapon is detonated only at the critical moment. No problem, Marcus. It's the business norm, and we can arrange for a top team of lawyers and financial advisors to handle all the details and make sure nothing goes wrong. Jonathan agreed with alacrity. One more thing, Marcus added, with a hint of undeniable determination in his tone. I'd like the payment to be a one-time buyout for my algorithmic technology, rather than a license fee model with installment payments. Jonathan was silent for a moment, seeming to weigh the pros and cons. That would be quite a sum, Marcus. You know, a one-time buyout would have been very stressful for us in terms of cash flow if we had gone with our previously projected annual revenues. I know. Marcus' answer was short and punchy. He needed the money to come into his control as fast and as cleanly as possible, without leaving anyone with questions or chances to trace it. Okay, Marcus, let me discuss this with the partner team. I'm sure we can come to an agreement. Jonathan eventually compromised, knowing that the value of Marcus' technology far outweighed any minor obstacles in the negotiations. The next day, Marcus received a revised draft contract from Redwood Ventures. The terms of the contract were shocking. Redwood Ventures agreed to pay $67 million for a one-time buyout of his algorithmic technology, plus a lucrative equity option when the company goes public in the future. That number far exceeded Marcus' initial expectations, but Jonathan explained on the call that their technology evaluation team had gone through several rounds of rigorous review and market research, and agreed that the technology's future value had been grossly underestimated by them, and that it could even lead to trillion-dollar incremental market growth. On the day he signed the official contract, Marcus sat calmly in Redwood Ventures' top-floor office and watched as lawyers from both sides worked on the final paperwork. He knew that the $67 million would be safely and securely transferred into his long-prepared offshore account within 48 hours. His mind echoed with Sophia's caustic, mocking words, surfacing Richard's hypocritical, self-righteous face, and the disgust and contempt that was becoming more and more evident in his wife's eyes. But there was no anger, no excitement in him, only an extreme calmness and a deep satisfaction in his bones. The game was about to begin, and he, the real manipulator of this game. The first night after the contract was signed, the night sky in Seattle was quiet and deep, but Marcus was sleepless. He sat in his study, not technical documents spread out on his desk, but his carefully drawn blueprints for revenge. The huge sum of $67 million had been safely deposited in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, a secret that Sophia could not touch with all her imagination. Under Washington law, only property acquired jointly during a marriage is subject to division, and this large sum of money was acquired by Marcus after he lost his job, solely through his own intellectual property and independent efforts. What's more, Sophia's infidelity and the conspiracy that will soon surface between her and Richard Blackwood will provide Marcus with additional legal protection, giving him the absolute upper hand in this unequal divorce battle. Marcus's first step was to create a more sophisticated, legal and trickle-down surveillance system and to ensure that all the evidence collected would stand up in court. He contacted a reputable digital research firm in the industry, headed by a Chinese-American woman named Chen, who is known for her rigorous professionalism and impeccable knowledge of the law. Marcus required them to provide a comprehensive evidence collection service, every detail of which had to comply with the law. We need to make sure that all the evidence was legally obtained, Sarah, Marcus said in a quiet but firm tone. I don't want any technicalities in the courtroom to leave anything open for the other side to exploit. Of course, Mr. Marcus, it's our specialty, Sarah replied, her voice calm and professional. We have a dedicated team of lawyers to ensure the legality of all procedures. Based on the preliminary information you have provided, we can obtain additional direct and compelling evidence through open channels, legal authorization, and digital forensics at. We'll peel them off like an onion, layer by layer, to reveal their true colors. Meanwhile, Marcus embarks on step 2 of his plan, to continue playing the role of the unemployed, incompetent loser with no clue about the future in front of Sophia. He knew that the best way to get his prey to completely let their guard down was to convince them that they had won. That evening, as usual, Sophia inquired carelessly over dinner about the progress of his job search, her tone perfunctory and routinely scornful. A small company called me back today, Marcus said, with a hint of frustration and helplessness in his tone. But the pay is only $45,000 a year, and there are no benefits, not even health insurance. Sophia's face flashed with an undisguised disappointment and disdain, and the knife and fork in her hand clashed with a harsh sound. 45,000. Marcus, our mortgage is going to be $3,000 a month, and with all the other expenses, that's not enough money for you to live on alone, let alone raise a family. She sneered, her tone filled with mockery. I know, but it's a difficult market right now, and it's hard enough for me to get a job like this. Maybe we should consider selling our house and moving somewhere cheaper, like renting a smaller apartment or moving to the suburbs. Marcus threw out the bait carefully. Sell the house. Marcus, what did you say? Sophia's voice instantly raised an octave, sharp as a knife. This is our home. This is my decent in Seattle. I'm not moving to the ghetto because you're incompetent. I won't let my friends look at me funny. She almost growled, her face filled with disgust. Marcus lowered his head in a frustrated and submissive gesture. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I know I've let you down. I know I've shamed you. I really tried my best. You do disappoint me, Marcus. Sophia said coldly, impatience in her tone. But what's the use of talking about it now? We need solutions, not useless apologies and frustrations like yours. What else do you do besides code? When she finished, she got up, ignored Marcus, and walked straight to the living room, turning on the TV as if Marcus didn't even exist. That night, Sophia went out once again to party with Madison. Marcus knew that she was actually going to see Richard. According to a new report from private investigator Thomas Reed, their relationship has progressed to the stage where they are discussing the future. Richard outlines a glittering future to Sophia, promising to divorce Madison once he's taken care of his finances and start a new life with Sophia in a luxury villa, driving a sports car, and enjoying endless wealth. Sophia is convinced of this and is immersed in the false dream Richard has woven. 2 weeks later, Sarah Chen brought more shocking evidence. In addition to tons of intimate photos, detailed correspondence, hotel spending lists, and secret recordings, she discovers an even more sinister detail. Your wife and Richard weren't just having an affair. Sarah's tone became serious with an insightful gleam in her eye. They were planning a bigger plot. According to our intercepted communications, Richard has been asking Sophia for details of your work and technical projects. This is way beyond an ordinary affair. Marcus frowned, an icy chill flashing in his eyes. What do you mean? What do they want from me? It appears that Richard is aware that you are developing some sort of technology, and while he doesn't know the specifics or value, he believes that your technology may have great commercial value, enough to help him out of his current financial predicament. Sophia has been gathering information for him, trying to find out if you have hidden assets or items that are not publicly available, even down to the types of files on your computer and where they are stored. Sarah explained, a hint of anger in her tone. Marcus sneered. So it is. This is not just an ordinary affair. This has evolved into a premeditated, elaborate betrayal and fraud for money and profit. Sophia's greed and Richard's cunning are far beyond his imagination. There's more, Mr. Marcus. Sarah continues. Richard's financial situation was worse than we had previously understood. It could be described as a mess. Not only is his fund facing huge losses, but he is also facing a regulator's investigation for allegedly illegally misappropriating investor funds, and creditors have begun pursuing him for his personal assets. He desperately needs an astronomical amount of money to get out of this mess or face bankruptcy and jail time. Marcus is starting to completely understand the whole situation. Richard and Sophia's relationship isn't about love at all. It's about a naked exchange of benefits. They all see Marcus as an incompetent loser, but at the same time they want to squeeze the last bit of surplus value out of him, even through fraud and theft. I need you to keep monitoring, Marcus said to Sarah, with undeniable determination in his voice, especially their next steps and what they're communicating with Preston Caldwell's lawyers. On the third day, Marcus got the information he was waiting for. Sophia and Richard plan to go public with their relationship early next month, and Sophia will officially file for divorce from Marcus. Her reasoning would be that Marcus's prolonged unemployment and character defects had led to the breakdown of the marriage, and that she herself was a victim of the failure. She has contacted one of Seattle's most recognized divorce attorneys, Preston Caldwell, an attorney known for specializing in high-asset divorces and his tough negotiating hand. Interestingly, Sophia apparently exaggerated Marcus's potential assets to Preston, claiming that he may have hidden intellectual property and technology projects, suggesting that Marcus may be deliberately concealing his wealth. She wants to legally compel Marcus to disclose all financial information and then divide any valuable assets. She figured that even if Marcus didn't have the big bucks, squeezing even a little out of him would be a lifesaver for her and Richard. Marcus realizes that this is the perfect time for him to strike back. He'd make them jump into the trap he'd set for them himself. Later that evening, Marcus initiated the topic of marriage. He knew that this was a crucial step in getting Sophia to let her guard down completely. "Sophia, I've been thinking about our relationship," he said, with a hint of remorse and helplessness in his tone. "I know I've let you down in recent months and put our lives in jeopardy." Sophia looked a little surprised. She hadn't expected Marcus to take the initiative to bring up the subject, and an imperceptible glint of anticipation flashed in her eyes. "What do you want to talk about? Have you finally figured it out? Maybe we need to reevaluate our marriage. I don't want my failures to continue to drag you down and make you feel unhappy." Marcus's voice was soft, but the words were devastating. Ecstasy flashed in Sophia's eyes, but it was quickly hidden from her. "Marcus," her voice suddenly became soft, the first time she had shown him some kindness in months, with a false sense of caring. "We've been married for 15 years, and I don't want to give it up easily. But you're right, we do need to face reality." "What kind of reality?" Marcus asked, knowing Sophia would give the answer she wanted. "If you can't find a decent job, if our finances continue to deteriorate, if we really can't face a future together, then maybe it's better for both of us to separate. It's probably for the best." Sophia's tone had a hint of, for his sake, hypocrisy. Marcus nodded and made a thoughtful expression. "I understand. Maybe we should consider separating for a while to give each other some space to think and cool off too. That way we can all plan better for the future." Sophia's face took on a look of excitement she was trying to hide, an overwhelming, victor's joy. "That's probably a good idea, Marcus. Thank you. You're finally growing up." She even stepped forward and gently patted Marcus on the shoulder, as if comforting a lost child. Over the next few days, Marcus continued to be a cooperative and understanding good husband, even offering to help Sophia carry some of her personal belongings to Madison's house. Meanwhile, Sophia began to meet with Richard more frequently and more recklessly to openly discuss the possibility of divorce. She even hinted in front of her friends that it was a painful decision she had made after much thought, as if it was an option she had just considered rather than a plot she had been planning for months. She can't wait to get rid of Marcus' baggage and move on to the golden future that Richard has painted for her. 2 weeks later, on a windy Tuesday night, Sophia formally asked Marcus for a divorce. Her tone was calm and firm, with a hint of a victor's stance. "I've consulted a lawyer, Marcus," she said to Marcus, who was sitting across from her on the couch in the living room, playing with the diamond ring Richard had given her in her hand, "and I think it's time for us to officially end this marriage. There is no hope left between us." Marcus showed a moderate amount of sadness and acceptance as he lowered his eyes, his voice low and slightly husky. "If that's what you want, Sophia, I won't object. I respect your choice. I'm hoping we can handle this civilly and peacefully," Sophia continued, with a hint of hypocritical thoughtfulness in her tone. "My attorney says the split should be relatively simple, given our current financial situation. I just want to get my fair share and start a new life." There's a glint in her eye of desire for impending riches and a complete abandonment of Marcus. Marcus nodded calmly, a hint of imperceptible sarcasm in his tone. "Of course, Sophia. I want us all to be treated fairly. I won't cause you any trouble." Sophia's inner satisfaction almost spilled over the surface. To her, Marcus remains the same weak, inept, rebellious loser who, even in the face of divorce, puts up no resistance and even seems a little pathetic. She was completely unaware that every move she made, every expression she made, was being monitored and calculated by Marcus, and that every word she uttered would become a sharp blade that would backfire on her own. Preston Caldwell, an experienced divorce attorney, has a simple and straightforward strategy. maximize the client's benefits, and minimize the other side's share. When Sophia first comes to his office, she describes a typical case: an unemployed, commercially worthless husband, a wife who has given everything to her family and is ultimately victimized, and the possibility of some hidden assets. The case of the unemployed husband with no business value. "I need you to dig up all his assets for me, Preston," Sophia said to Preston, a hint of greed in her tone. "I know Marcus has some tech projects he's always tinkering with in his study that could be more valuable than he claims. He may be deliberately hiding it." Preston nodded, a shrewd glint in his eyes. "That's our specialty, Miss Sophia. We will apply for full financial disclosure, including all bank accounts, investments, intellectual property, and potential sources of income. If he does have hidden assets, we'll make sure he has nothing to hide." "Well, Preston," Sophia said contentedly, with a smug smile on her face, "I want to be able to deal with this quickly. I really can't wait to start my new life." "I understand your urgency, Miss Sophia," Preston said in a calm tone with a hint of reassurance, "but a thorough investigation takes time. However, based on your description, I believe we can obtain a very favorable result, and you have nothing to worry about." In the meantime, Marcus contacted one of Seattle's best divorce lawyers, Elizabeth Warren. Not the famous senator, but a top attorney who is well known in the local legal community and specializes in complex high-asset property cases. She is known for her thoughtfulness, sharp arguments, and precise grasp of the letter of the law. "Elizabeth, I need your help with a very complicated and unusual divorce case." Marcus opened the door at their first meeting and said he knew Elizabeth was trustworthy. "Of course, Mr. Marcus. Please tell me the basics." Elizabeth had a serious expression on her face and picked up a pen ready to take notes. Marcus spends a full hour describing the entire situation in detail and calmly, from Sophia and Richard Blackwood's infidelity, to their premeditated plot, to his own true financial situation and the entire process of how he set up this sophisticated trap, step by step. He didn't leave out a single detail, including the seemingly inconsequential conversations and tiny changes in Sophia. Elizabeth was silent for a long time as she listened, and she pushed up her glasses with a gleam of surprise and appreciation in her eyes. "It's really a very complex, but at the same time a very strong case. Your wife is obviously ignorant of your true financial situation, and her infidelity, and more critically, her attempts with Richard Blackwood to fraudulently acquire your intellectual property, will provide us with a huge advantage. In Washington, although it is a no-fault divorce state, judges will still consider one party's infidelity when dividing property, especially if there was fraud, concealment, or conspiracy to acquire the other party's property. This is highly persuasive in court. I want to be able to legally protect my assets," Marcus said. There was no hint of anger in his voice, only a calm determination. "But at the same time, I want Sophia to pay a deserved and painful price for her betrayal and greed. I don't want her to take a penny of my hard labor." "I understand your determination. We need to be careful with the timing of financial disclosures. The law requires us to disclose all of our assets, but we can control when and how we do it to maximize its impact and catch the other side off guard." Elizabeth analyzed calmly. Over the next few weeks, the two teams of lawyers began their initial encounter. Preston applied for full financial disclosure on behalf of Sophia, requesting that Marcus provide all bank records, tax documents, investment details, and proof of business activity. Like a seasoned hunter, he tries to find every penny Marcus might be hiding by casting a wide net. Marcus, in turn, through Elizabeth, provides the other side with what appears to be complete but is actually carefully screened information. He disclosed his unemployment status, his meager savings account balance, only a few $1,000s, and that credit card debt that seemed quite substantial. He didn't lie, but he also didn't volunteer information about the huge Redwood Ventures deal, because the money was held openly and honestly in an offshore account Sophia never knew about, and was completely out of the realm of the couple's community property. Preston reviewed the documents and reported to Sophia that Marcus's financial situation was indeed as bad as she had initially described, and even worse than she had imagined. "It really does seem like your husband is a total loser, Miss Sophia," Preston told Sophia over the phone, with a hint of regret in his tone as if he was feeling sorry for her. "His net worth is almost zero, and his main asset is a half interest in the property in his name, which is worth roughly $150,000. Other than that, it's a few debts and a pitiful few $1,000s in savings. He's really not as rich as you think. Sophia was a little disappointed, but then again, that was to be expected. No hidden technology programs, no patents or other intellectual property rights. Hasn't he been working on some AI algorithm? We'll continue to dig deeper, Miss Sophia, but I haven't found anything of value at this point, at least not in the traceable records. He's probably just drumming up some worthless hobby. Preston explains. Meanwhile, Marcus and Elizabeth begin to prepare their counterattack. They assembled all the evidence of Sophia's infidelity provided by Chen investigations, including the shocking photographs, detailed communication records, hotel spending bills, and secret recordings. More importantly, they compiled evidence of Sophia and Richard's attempts to steal Marcus's technical information, including transcripts of conversations in which they conspired to question Marcus about the details of his work and attempted to obtain his computer passwords. The evidence is very strong, Marcus. Elizabeth told Marcus, with the confidence of a victor in her tone, it will not only prove beyond all reasonable doubt her infidelity, but also her attempts to gain access to your personal property through fraudulent means. One might even say theft. This is no longer just an extramarital affair. This is enough of a legal basis for marital fraud and may even involve a criminal offense. What is marriage fraud? Marcus asked, curious. Simply put, if one party has made a premeditated attempt to obtain property or benefits from the other party during the marriage through acts of deception, concealment, or betrayal, the court may grant the aggrieved party additional protections and remedies in the division of property. Sophia's behavior is not only emotional betrayal, it is a deliberate plunder of property. Elizabeth explained. Marcus nodded, an icy chill flashing in his eyes. What does this mean? What will she face? This means that even though Washington is a community property state, Sophia's actions could result in her losing most, if not all, of her property division rights. The judge would have ruled extremely unfavorably against her based on her misconduct. She will have nothing. A month later, the attorneys for both sides scheduled a formal financial disclosure conference. This will be the most crucial moment in the entire divorce proceedings and the most important part of Marcus' elaborate revenge plan. He knew that on this day, he would completely tear down Sophia's disguise and leave her as she was in front of everyone. The meeting was arranged in the bright and spacious office of the Preston Caldwell attorney, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto the bustling streets of Seattle. Participants included Marcus, Sophia, two attorneys, and a court-appointed, serious-looking financial expert. Sophia looks confident and relaxed in a brand-new, value-priced business suit, sophisticated makeup, and meticulously coiffed hair. As far as she was concerned, it was just a pro forma procedure to go through the motions, confirm Marcus's impoverished status, and then fast-track the divorce. She couldn't wait to start her new life with Richard, and even glanced at Marcus smugly before the meeting began, with pity and a hint of unconcealed triumph in her eyes. Marcus, on the other hand, is wearing a plain, dark suit and looks a little nervous and uneasy, his face slightly pale. It's exactly what Sophia expects of him, a fired, abandoned, failed husband about to lose everything, woefully out of touch. He acted so perfectly that Sophia was unaware of it. Preston Caldwell cleared his throat and took the lead in starting the meeting, with a hint of confidence in his tone that he was in control of the situation. Okay, guys. Today we will complete the financial disclosure process. Mr. Marcus, please provide a detailed description of your current financial situation, including all assets, liabilities, and sources of income. Marcus cleared his throat, his voice sounding a little raspy with a hint of an imperceptible tremor. As the documents I previously provided through attorney Elizabeth indicate, I am currently unemployed and live primarily on my meager monthly unemployment benefits. I have about $8,000 in savings and some credit card debt totaling about $30,000. Beyond that, there is no other income. He deliberately displays a sense of embarrassment and helplessness, reinforcing Sophia's and Preston's belief in his poverty. Preston nodded and asked with a grimace, any other sources of income, like investments, patents, consulting work, or any kind of business activity? No, Marcus replied firmly, with a hint of driven desperation in his tone. "I've been looking for a job without success, and the market is not friendly to programmers of my age. My skills seem really outdated." Sophia nodded softly from the sidelines, a false look of sympathy on her face, as if she felt sorry for Marcus's plight, when in fact she was already happy inside. Then, Preston continued, with a hint of superiority in his eyes, "According to our calculations, the principal community property in Mr. Marcus's name is that property, which has a net value of approximately $150,000 after deducting the mortgage. Other than that, there are no other significant assets." "Yes, Attorney Preston, I agree with that assessment," Marcus replied obediently. Satisfied, Preston looked to Sophia with a hint of certainty in his tone. "Miss Sophia, is there anything you would like to add? Or do you believe Mr. Marcus has any undisclosed assets?" "No, Preston," Sophia replied, a winning smile on her face and confidence in her tone. "I think Marcus has been very honest in disclosing our finances. He really has nothing more to hide." She even gave Marcus a contemptuous look, as if to say, "You're nothing but poor." Just then, Attorney Elizabeth Warren, who had been silent, slowly stood up. She had a meaningful smile on her face. "Actually, Counselor Preston, there are some additional documents that need to be disclosed," she said, removing a thick folder from her briefcase and placing it on the table with a dull thud. Preston frowned, a flash of confusion in his eyes and a hint of displeasure in his tone. "What papers?" "Attorney Elizabeth, we have received all of the disclosure documents provided by your side and have conducted a thorough review. Under Washington state law, all assets acquired during a marriage must be disclosed, regardless of their source. While the information previously provided by my client is accurate, there are some recent developments that need to be updated, and we feel it is necessary to disclose them once and for all on this occasion today," Elizabeth said nonchalantly, a hint of unquestioning authority in her tone. Elizabeth slowly pushed the folder to the center of the table, the Redwood Ventures logo clearly printed on the folder. "3 months ago, my client, Mr. Marcus Chen, sold a one-time patent to Redwood Ventures Venture Capital for a revolutionary AI algorithmic technology that he personally developed in his spare time, independently, after losing his job." The room suddenly fell into a dead silence, a pin drop. The blood on Sophia's face instantly faded, and she became as pale as paper. Preston's face froze as well, and he stared at the folder dead in the face, as if he'd seen something incredible. "The sale price is $67 million, Elizabeth said calmly, each word like a heavy bomb that boomed through the room. The pen in Preston Caldwell's hand snapped, slipped from his stiff fingers, and fell to the table with a crisp thud. Sophia's body trembled violently. She looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her mouth was slightly open, but she couldn't make any sound. Her eyes were filled with disbelief and extreme fear. This can't be." Sophia finally let out a shaky voice, tinged with sobs, her voice sharp and harsh with desperate denial. "Marcus doesn't have any valuable technology at all. He's a loser. He didn't." Elizabeth smiled as she opened the folder and showed the documents inside one by one to everyone present. "Here are the official bank transfer records from Redwood Ventures showing that the money arrived in full 2 weeks ago. This is a copy of the patent buyout contract between Redwood Ventures and Mr. Marcus Chen, along with related tax documents. All documents are notarized and authentic." She pointed to the clear numbers on the contract and the signatures of both parties, ironclad. Preston tried to regain his professional image, but his voice sounded a little shaky. "Why? Why wasn't this information disclosed before? This is a cover-up for the court." "Because this transaction was not finalized until after the divorce proceedings had officially begun, Attorney Preston," Elizabeth replied, with a hint of sarcasm in her tone. "What's more, this technology is based entirely on the intellectual property developed independently by my client, Mr. Marcus Chen, using his personal time and resources after he lost his job. Under Washington law, this income is not part of the community property of the couple. It is entirely the personal property of Mr. Marcus." Sophia stood up in sudden hysteria and pointed at Marcus, her voice shrill and distorted. "It's not fair. Marcus deliberately withheld this information. He cheated on me." Elizabeth continues to maintain a calm demeanor, her eyes sharp. "Actually, Miss Sophia, we have some other disclosures that may surprise you even more. She pulled another thick folder out of her briefcase, which appeared to contain more photographs and documents. Evidence of Ms. Sophia's months-long affair with Mr. Richard Blackwood and their conspiracy to try to steal my client's technical information. Preston's face became very hard to look at, and thin beads of sweat oozed from his forehead. As an experienced attorney, he immediately realized that the case had just gone from a simple division of property to a complex case of fraud, betrayal, and conspiracy to commit theft. This is beyond his scope of handling ordinary divorce cases. I need to discuss this privately with my client. Preston practically growled, knowing that every word he said now could have disastrous consequences. Of course, Counselor Preston. Elizabeth agreed, but her voice was quiet, yet loud. But I need to remind you that under Washington state law, infidelity and premeditated attempts to defraud during a marriage can seriously affect property division and may even result in the at-fault party losing all rights to property division. What's more, it's already a criminal offense. The meeting was suspended. In the lounge, Sophia had a complete meltdown. She slumped in her chair, tears and snot smeared across her face like a desperate child. I can't believe this, Preston. I can't believe it. She cried and yelled at Preston, her voice filled with unbelievable anger and fear. $67 million? How can Marcus have $67 million? How could he have fooled me for so long? Preston tries to stay calm, but he's shocked and powerless himself. Miss Sophia, we must be calm now. We need to scrutinize these documents provided by Elizabeth's attorney. If their claims are true and the technology was indeed developed during the marriage, then you are still entitled to a portion, even if Marcus claims it was developed after he lost his job. He tried to give her a glimmer of hope. But what if they have proof that I cheated? And the recordings of me and Richard discussing those secret projects of his. Sophia's voice became sharper, tinged with fear and despair. That would complicate things, Miss Sophia. It's very complicated. Preston's tone is heavy. Although Washington is a no-fault divorce state, judges still consider infidelity when dividing property, especially when it involves an attempt to defraud, concealment of property, or even a conspiracy to steal the other party's property. It would have completely changed the course of the entire case. You could be left with nothing and even face legal action. He realizes now that Sophia's greed and Richard's insidiousness have pushed her over the edge. Meanwhile, in the other room, Marcus and Elizabeth are discussing their final strategy. Marcus had a cold calmness on his face, as if he had everything under control. She'll want to reconcile now, Marcus. Elizabeth predicted, a confident gleam in her eye. But based on the evidence we have a definite advantage. She doesn't have any bargaining chips left. I don't want a reconciliation, Elizabeth. Marcus said calmly, with undeniable determination in his tone. I want her to suffer the full consequences of her actions, of her betrayal and fraud. I'm going to show her what the price of betrayal is. The meeting resumed an hour later. Sophia's eyes were red and puffy, and her face was still streaked with tears, so it was clear that she had been crying for a long time. Preston's face is unusually pale as he struggles to try and regain control, but his voice has lost the confidence it held before. We hold that even if there had been a sale of the technology claimed by Mr. Marcus, Miss Sophia would still have been entitled to one half of the community property of the couple. Preston began, with a hint of feeble insistence in his tone, which is a community property under Washington state law principle. Elizabeth shook her head, a disdainful smile on her face. I'm afraid that's not true, Counselor Preston. First, as we previously disclosed, this technology was developed entirely after Mr. Marcus lost his job, using his personal time and resources, which are not legally part of the couple's joint property. Second, we have ample evidence that Miss Sophia and her lover, Mr. Richard Blackwood, have not only been unfaithful to my client during their marriage, but have also conspired to try to steal information about this technology, which has constituted an aggravated case of marital fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. She pulled out the last set of documents, which was a much more detailed investigation. Here is the full report provided by Chen Investigations, including a months-long record of Ms. Sophia's and Mr. Richard Blackwood's correspondence, detailed summaries of the timing and content of their calls, as well as intimate photographic evidence of their numerous hotel rooms, and most critically, recordings of them discussing how to obtain information about Mr. Marcus' hidden projects and a detailed plan for how to use that information to save Mr. Richard Blackwood from financial ruin. Sophia's face turned white as her body began to tremble, a desperate fear in her eyes. "Have you? You've been watching me. How dare you?" "We gathered the evidence legally, Miss Sophia, and everything was in accordance with the legal process," Elizabeth replied, her voice clear and cold. "This evidence is more than enough to prove that not only have you been unfaithful to your husband, but that you have tried to gain access to his personal property through fraud and conspiracy, even going so far as to steal his hard-earned heart and soul to your lover." Preston knows the game is completely over. There was no turning back for his client. He looked at Sophia and then at Marcus, and he knew he had to fight for Sophia with a minimum of decency. "What do you want?" Preston's voice sounded tired and raspy. He had completely given up resisting. "It's simple, Counselor Preston," Elizabeth said in a firm, unquestioning tone. "Uncontested divorce." Miss Sophia kept her personal belongings, including her clothing, jewelry, and the car that was in her name, and about $200,000 in that secret account she had set up with Mr. Richard Blackwood. Mr. Marcus, on the other hand, will retain all other assets, including the property and all of his technology income. This is not fair. I'm entitled to half the property." Sophia finally found her voice and she cried out in desperation, trying to make a last stand. Marcus addressed Sophia directly for the first time, his voice calm, but with an unnerving authority. He looked at Sophia, his eyes deep and cold, as if they could penetrate her soul. "You're entitled to half of the legal marital property, Sophia. But you gave up those rights when you decided to betray me, cheat on me, and make plans with another man to steal my work product. You tore up the contract between us with your own hands. You buried your future with your own hands." Sophia tried to defend herself, her voice laced with sobs and filled with remorse and despair. "I never tried to steal anything. I just want to know if you have money or not." Elizabeth didn't waste any more time. She just played a recording, the conversation between Sophia and Richard Blackwood about how to get information about Marcus' hidden projects and how to use this information to save Richard from bankruptcy, echoed clearly in the room. The conversation between Sophia and Mr. Richard Blackwood about how to obtain information about Marcus' hidden projects and how to use that information to save Richard from bankruptcy echoed clearly throughout the room, and every word was like a hammer hitting Sophia's heart. "This is sufficient evidence of marital fraud and conspiracy," Elizabeth said, without a hint of pity in her voice. "If this case goes to court, Miss Sophia will not only lose all rights to property division, but she could also face criminal charges for alleged fraud and conspiracy to steal another person's intellectual property." Preston knows that his client has lost his ass. He glanced helplessly at Sophia, whose eyes had completely festered. "I need to discuss the offer with my client," Preston said, a hint of pleading in his tone. 2 hours later, Sophia, a once untouchable, greedy and vain woman, with tear stains and despair, signed the divorce papers. She will keep her personal belongings, her fancy car, and a mere $200,000 left in that secret account. Marcus will receive the property, all technology revenues, and all other assets. She has lost everything she once spurned and the future she once aspired to. When all the papers are signed, Marcus looks at Sophia one last time. His eyes were calm and deep. There was no pity or anger, only a kind of calmness after weathering the storm. "I hope you and Richard will be very happy," he said calmly, with cold sarcasm in every word. "Though I've heard that his fund is facing total bankruptcy, and creditors are already going after all his personal assets." A look of despair crosses Sophia's face. She suddenly realizes that having lost Marcus's vast fortune, her value to Richard has diminished considerably. She had thought she had grabbed a money tree, but it turned out to be a rotting dead tree. All her beautiful dreams were completely shattered at this moment. The next day, Marcus received a final report from Thomas Reed. Richard Blackwood's fund did go completely bankrupt, and all of his personal assets were frozen and seized by creditors. To make matters worse, Richard's wife, Madison, has discovered his infidelity and has filed for divorce, seeking to divide Richard's only remaining seized assets. Richard Blackwood is not only facing bankruptcy and huge debts, He is also going to be discredited and disowned. A week later, Marcus moved into a luxury penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle. From his spacious balcony, he could look out over the entire magnificent Seattle skyline, the city lights as bright as his radiant future. On his desk were several offers to collaborate from other top tech companies, as well as an offer for a visiting professorship from Stanford University, an honor he could only dream of. Marcus's cell phone rings. It's Jonathan Miller. Marcus, I have good news. We have just received an offer from global tech giant Google, who has shown great interest in your AI algorithms and wants to develop the next generation of core AI systems based on your algorithms. Marcus picked up the phone, his voice steady and strong. Tell me more details, Jonathan. They're willing to pay another $20 million for the exclusive rights to develop this technology and would like you to serve as their chief algorithmic advisor, responsible for the technical direction of the entire AI program. This deal will put you at the pinnacle of your industry as a true technology leader. Marcus made his way to the balcony where he stood overlooking the city that had witnessed his pain and struggle and now witnessed his rebirth by fire. Not far away, he learns that Sophia is in her rented apartment, trying to use her $200,000 inheritance to maintain the lavish lifestyle to which she was accustomed, while Richard Blackwood is in the courtroom, dealing with bankruptcy proceedings and Madison's infamous divorce. Schedule a meeting, Jonathan. Marcus said to Jonathan Miller on the other end of the line, with a tone of confidence and aplomb. I'm interested in hearing their full proposal. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.